Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Moynihan Report. I'm your host, Michael Moynihan, from a white room. This is this is White Rabbit. I'm sorry, I'm not in a mental institution, although I imagine that's what it looks like. I'm just, I'm just going around the city, going from place to place, talking to interesting people. No different today, because very happy today to keep it in the family. We've been doing this a little bit. We've had the great Bridget Phetasy, the great Meghan McCain, and now the kind of okay, slightly mediocre, but he can perform sometimes. Robby Soave, who's also on the 2A network on the group chat, but as I said to him before, he has more shows than Parliament put out records. It's the group chat. Rising? Is it Rising? Are you still doing that? Reason? You in the Reason Roundtable?
I'm doing that tomorrow and next month. I don't know, man. I wake up every day. I look at my calendar. I see the 4 or 5 different shows I have to record, often discussing some of the same topics. And
Correct.
I say to myself, man, if you're like a Robby super fan, I don't know how this isn't getting boring for you.
Are there Robby super fans, Robby? Do we know that?
One or two who show up to Reason events and like talking to me and some of my colleagues. So I guess there are dozens of us.
There are dozens, and they do really pin you against the wall when there's a Reason event or a similar event, and they will say things to me. I'm sure you have this experience, and they say, "Do you remember on episode 48 when you said?" I'm like, "No, I don't. I barely remember like who my family is, much less the dumb things that I say on the internet." Because guess what, Robby? It doesn't matter what you say on the internet anymore, because we can't be canceled. Robby, how the hell are you? Just generally, how the hell are you?
I am doing quite well.
Yes.
Yeah, having a good December. Life is good. Doing a lot of talking on various television programs, as I just said. Enjoying the 2A platform, interacting with our community members on the group chat. It's a lot of fun. So I love doing it. I love life, man. I'm good.
Well, let's talk. I mean, Robby, the great thing about having Robby on, and obviously I'm joking, Robby is a polymath. And I don't, you know what? This is actually true. I didn't even give Robby topics for today. I just said, we'll talk, because the man doesn't need them, because this is his job. But I wanted to talk about our impending invasion, occupation, and extension of the American empire into Venezuela. The big issue with this, by the way, as everyone knows, is the kind of double tap strike that the Washington Post initially reported that Secretary of War, not Defense, of War, Pete Hegseth, said, leave no survivors on one of these strikes on Venezuelan boats that aren't carrying fentanyl. I think we can say pretty confidently that the non-fentanyl producing nation of Venezuela is probably not carrying any fentanyl. But I'm trying to figure out, Robby, in between my own chaotic life, what is true about this and what isn't? The New York Times did a follow-up story that said, well, we talked to 5 sources that said that order was never given, but it seems as if, Donald Trump had walked away from it and said, well, I wouldn't do that. What do we know about this controversy that, just another day in Trump world that is affecting the administration in almost no way that I can tell? And then let's talk about why we're even doing any of this. So what do you make of the reporting on this, and what do we think is true or is not true?
I mean, I think they first denied that they did it because that was their instinct. And then they realized after they denied it that, oh, we actually don't care if we did it. So we can just say that we did in fact do it. That was what changed. It's slightly unclear whether I saw some of my colleagues looking at me in here. I wonder if I spoke to some. Sorry, Catherine, I'm in here.
Tell Catherine we said hello.
There's some confusion, right, over whether Pete Hegseth specifically said no survivors, or whether that was an order made by the general, who was literally the person who called for the second strike. And that does matter because of a component of international law and law we've signed on to, that you don't deliberately kill people that are no longer of any kind of combat threat. It gets a little bit more confusing than that, because if the mission is to destroy the boat, and the boat is not sufficiently destroyed in their estimation from the first strike, and they're just shooting it again, and the consequence of that is that people who are no threat to them then die. But of course, the people were no threat to them initially too. So I
Yeah.
actually find the harping on the second strike to be a little, I mean, it's being done because of this international law provision, but it's a little suspect to me because if the initial strike is proper, then I mean, if you fire on the boat and destroy it, you have to expect that everyone's going to be killed. So
Yeah.
really the question is whether that was correct, whether that is within the president's authority to say these people are terrorists and thus I can drone them to death. And that is where I think this has clearly gone awry, and people should, like Rand Paul, should be asking questions like, why has Congress not given an authorization for this kind of thing? Because, not to be like a slippery slope libertarian, but if the president can just say, well, I said you're a terrorist and you're in international waters and I can kill you, that just seems like obviously an escalation of powers.
Right. And now Antifa is a terrorist organization, right, by the designation of the United States government. So God knows if there's going to be a strike on the fixie bikes of Portland or something. But this is the major issue. I mean, George Will quoted as saying Pete Hegseth is a war criminal without a war. There is no war. There is no war declared. There's no congressional oversight, much like many things, including tariffs and the president, this empowering of the president, which has grown since George W. Bush to totally alarming levels, and so alarming, in fact, that nobody even cares or pays attention anymore. But what do you believe? And there's no stated beyond, I mean, there is a stated theory that this is terrorism. They are narco-terrorists. I do believe myself that Venezuela is a narco state in any definition of the term, but we are killing people because they will ultimately be killing Americans. Now, I'll quote again George Will, who I love, and said on I think News Nation to Leland Vittert, and he was going after Will. And he said, look, these are people, and this is why Robby and I are libertarians, who are killing themselves. I mean, they're not coming in with guns and shooting Americans. So the idea that they're being killed and by boats that presumably are just carrying cocaine, if they're carrying anything at all, we don't know what they're carrying. We don't know who the people are. No one's been identified except for a Colombian fisherman. The Venezuelans are not identifying anyone. But what do you believe the actual reason for this is? Because is this going to have any appreciable effect on drug abuse in the country or deaths from people? I mean, cocaine overdoses? I mean, come on. Why, if it's not that, is the administration so bullish on going after a country that I think has been ruled by criminals since 1999, I guess, 98, 99?
If just blowing up drug traffickers a little bit more, a little bit harder, a little bit more like, yeah, get them.
Yeah.
If that was going to solve the drug problem in America, we would have solved it decades ago, because we've been trying to solve it this exact way for decades. And all we do is, drive it further into the hands of bad people. It's more profitable. These, very obvious black market economics at play. So it can't really be that. That's how it's being justified to MAGA sycophantic type people. But I mean, I'm at a loss for explaining exactly how this got on Trump's radar, but he does seem suddenly somewhat quite interested in the idea of a regime change thing happening in Venezuela, and this is just a pretext to that. And it matters because, again, it is fine to take law enforcement measures against alleged drug dealers, but the difference between it being a war and and it was kind of an overseas law enforcement operation would be, if it's a designated war, there are different, you can kill the people and ask questions later to a greater extent. Not that we really want that necessarily being done. Yeah. But if it's law enforcement, well, then you can neutralize them if they're actively shooting at you. But these people in this boat have no immediate ability to harm American citizens or American law enforcement personnel. So if it's just law enforcement, there's no excuse for doing what they're doing. And if it's a war, it needs to be considered and contemplated by Congress. If we're going to go to war with Venezuela, or we're going to, oust Nicolas Maduro, well, I want to hear the reasons for it argued in the halls of Congress, the way actually are now unpopular, but voted for at the time, wars in the Middle East of the aughts, those did get congressional authorizations. They were debated, discussed, and approved. And as much as everyone likes to, despise George W. Bush as a shredder of the Constitution, well, they went and did it the right way. They built a case. They're not even bothering to do that. And most people in Congress, aside from like Rand Paul, don't seem to care at all. And I think that's the big, of all the norms being degraded and broken up, this idea that just the president does whatever he wants, the office of the presidency, not this president in particular, it doesn't matter that it's Donald Trump, that the office of the presidency can do this, and Congress will not care unless Congress is controlled by the opposition party, opposition to the president. They will not care in any other circumstance. That's one of the most regrettable losses of norms that I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, I want to ask you about how you think this is playing amongst the MAGA coalition, both, within government, within Congress, and the average voter. Because look, I mean, if I had a nickel for every time somebody in the MAGA coalition was sneering about neocons, and it was the neocons who called everything a terrorist, and everybody—
Have they ever done that to you, Michael? I can't imagine.
Never.
I can't even picture
No,
it.
definitely not Reason commenters.
Yeah.
Widely loved by the Reason commenters back in the day. But that idea that, we can set up Guantanamo, we can, attack and kill in a drone strike an American citizen in Yemen. This idea of, well, saying something is a counterterrorism operation is an excuse for these people who want regime change, right? Who are trying to expand America's reach in the world. Why is this not applicable now? I don't understand how this is not— I guess there are fewer Jews involved. Is that why it's not a neocon conspiracy? Who knows? But that kind of idea that Trump was the president of somebody who was a paleoconservative, or was somebody who opposed neoconservatism, somebody was a Taftian conservative in the kind of 50s sense. This, not only with America joining a strike on Iran, still actively supporting the war in Ukraine, not backing away from its support for Israel, and now potentially overthrowing the Venezuelan government. And, Trump unilaterally decided the airspace over Venezuela was closed the other day. And hilariously, it's open again for a deportation flight from the United States of Venezuelans. Am I crazy in thinking that maybe there is no ideological core to the MAGA movement when it comes to foreign policy? Because nobody, with the exception as people you mentioned, is the people we'd expect: Tom Massey, Rand Paul, the sort of more libertarian instinct having politicians. But what do you see from those people who have been squawking about America's footprint abroad and non-interventionism? Where are they now? Where is the Tucker Carlsons of the world? I mean, look, he said he was pro-Venezuela because they don't like gay people there and they don't have gay marriage. And if you think I'm joking about that, you can look the clip up. But where is that coalition? They seem to be kind of either silent or cheering it on.
Yeah, that was one of the most idiotic defenses of leaving Maduro in power, is that he's some great conservative hero.
Yes.
I do think, all I can do is analyze basically people I follow who are MAGA, non-interventionist, anti-neocon type people, and try to judge their level of dissatisfaction with the world and with Trump at any time. And it seems to me that there is some level of disagreement with what Trump is doing here and what the Defense Department, now the War Department, is doing. Jesus Christ. And that was the first sign it was not going to be in America. They renamed the department, and I say, I kind of don't like that. And then they go, oh, you're such a cringe lib. War is cool and based. Why are you so cringy? I'm like, okay, well, maybe they rename it that because they're going to launch a war, and now they're launching a war. And I'm supposed to be the cringe lib here. I thought we wanted America first. And I say this as someone who is probably more favorably inclined to some of the broader what Trump has done on foreign policy relative to what the alternative would have been. The alternative both being other Republicans and Democrats, or what we had during Joe Biden, which was just the world totally coming off its axis because we had someone as president who had no idea what was going on and was not, in my view, taken seriously by foreign leaders, enemies, adversaries, friends alike. And I appreciate Donald Trump's articulation of America first foreign policy and an attempt to do his best to negotiate a better relations with a lot of people, and I appreciate you might have a different view, but what he's done in Europe, trying to resolve that as best he can, I am willing to give some leeway to a president who is trying to be a little bit America first, but recognizes how difficult it is and is, doing his best. What can you want? I'll never get exactly what I want. I'll never get Paul or Thomas Massie as president. So I'm not like sitting here looking for reasons to be upset about the foreign policy. I frankly approve of Donald Trump's foreign policy more than I do his domestic policy. We're being honest about that.
Me too. Yeah. I would say the same,
but I can't look at this Venezuela policy and see any rhyme or reason to it. And I am seeing dissatisfaction from MAGA. But whenever you see dissatisfaction from MAGA, Trump generally grinds that down over time. You saw it with the Epstein thing, and and that's a more complicated situation where I see some of the arguments raised by people on all sides of that. But it's Trump's party, although he's not going to be on the ballot again, and there's got to be a new leader coming up. And I don't even know where a J.D. Vance type person, someone who maybe seemed even more ideological in general, and then
for sure
to a non-interventionist foreign policy. How does he feel about this? We're not actually hearing from him on it very much.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the interesting thing about Trump is that he does surround himself, including his son. I mean, Don Jr. is going on. I mean, last time I saw him flapping his gums, he was talking to Jillian Michaels about Nick Fuentes and the neocons as his father was trying to make the old bus driver, Nicolas Maduro, get on a bus out of Venezuela. But I was wondering this the other day. I was talking to someone, and I just had this thought, said, wait a second, because Trump had said to Maduro, they had a call, and in a classic Trump way, by the way, it's a very funny clip where somebody asked him on Air Force One, he's like, did you have a call with Nicolas Maduro? He's like, I cannot say if I did, but I did. Which is like, okay, I guess that's something. And there is apparently a Trump ultimatum. Now, no one has pointed out that there was a Trump ultimatum to Hamas that we will turn you into finely ground dust if you don't do X or release the hostages by the weekend, and that nothing ever came of that. But he said they've talked to Maduro and you got to get out of there. And even there was some reporting suggesting that you would be immune from prosecution, keeping in mind that the American government has a $50 million bounty on Maduro's head for drug smuggling and various other crimes. And the man is a criminal. He's from head to toe, he's a criminal. And if that happens, that say he gave this Friday deadline, if Maduro slips out of the country and says, you know what, I'll take your deal. I know this is not going to go well for me. Look at what just happened in the Middle East. They did a good job there. They've managed to get what they want. I'm going to get out of here because that's the best deal I'm going to get. I wonder what in MAGA world, and just in Washington and in media in general, the reaction will be is like, hey, say, okay, we killed 30, 40 people, but they're drug dealers. They're narco terrorists. And you got rid of this regime that every single administration since Bill Clinton in 99 has been trying to dislodge, and Donald Trump did it. I mean, if I imagine that happening, I don't think that vision of an America First foreign policy is going to stay intact, and the J.D. Vances of the world will have to actually kind of move a little bit because it's kinetic. We're killing people in boats, but there's no boots on the ground. We're not going to occupy Venezuela. We'll help the Venezuelan government. We'll help the transition. We've already done that and recognized people like Juan Guaido in the past. And here's the other benefit from Donald Trump's standpoint: the number of Venezuelans that will go back to their country that have been coming into the country for the past, God knows how many years. What do you make of the potential? And I hate to make you Nostradamus.
I root for that outcome. How could anyone not root for that outcome? That would be kind of fine, right? I mean, this is where the problem that some libertarians run into, or people articulating a libertarian foreign policy view, like Tucker Carlson in this case, who I wouldn't describe as a libertarian otherwise, but maybe on foreign policy.
Former Cato scholar.
Right. He doesn't have any of those views anymore.
Yeah, those are all gone. But
you can fall into the same problem that the left falls into, where just because you're against the intervention doesn't mean you have to defend the record of the person, of the reprehensible dictator. Like, we don't have to be moral relativists. The U.S. is a better country. America is a force for good. Our government does a lot of things I oppose, things that are even reprehensible, and our government is not bad in the way that Nicolas Maduro's government is bad. We don't need to say, well, just because we did something wrong, that gives me some reason to say nice things about China or Putin, whichever direction. That's leftist stuff that libertarians should be able to reject, even as we say, I don't want to send the military into Venezuela and then occupy that country while they transition to democracy. We've had enough of that. But if through Trump's diplomacy, Maduro exits, and then the people there have the right to rise up and choose a different government. It's just that we, the United States, have no obligation to help them through it. Like like the analogy of the caterpillar that's turning into the butterfly, and you dig it out of its cocoon too early, and then it dies. Right? That's what we don't need to help it get out of the cocoon. It's got to accomplish that on its own, or it's not going to stick, as we found out in the Middle East. But in a country like Syria, where they ousted their brutal dictator and have installed someone that I think we had every reason to be deeply skeptical of.
A former member of Al-Qaeda, to be clear.
But I liked it when he wants Western engagement. He likes visiting New York. And, we got to live in the real world. And if some of these people, anybody who wants to have broader engagement, positive engagement in the West, we should accept if they're moving in that direction, especially if we didn't have to do all that much to bring that about. That could be the situation in Venezuela. However, I would not have the confidence the Trump administration seems to be projecting that is the sole or most likely outcome, or one we should foster by being really involved there. And so and again, or we could, but we have to vote on it. We have to debate it, discuss it, and vote on it. And then we can see where people stand. And then you could hold your senator or member of the House responsible if it goes badly.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what happens to the vision of foreign policy. There was, a libertarian vision. It was a Chomskyite vision, something shared by both the left and the right, which was not that we shouldn't do it with boots on the ground, is that we shouldn't be engaged in these things. It's none of our business. We should not be, telling the Cubans how to live any more than we should be telling the Russians how to live or the Venezuelans how to live. If the Republican foreign policy becomes something that will throw a few people against the wall, threaten them, and we'll get what we want, I don't see that it's too different from what people would have previously considered neoconservative foreign policy. Because look, there was the idea in the Cold War was one of two things. It was containment, which is what we did, or rollback. The idea of rollback was that we actively fight. But that in 1956 in Hungary, the disappointment of the Hungarians when the uprising happened, that coming from American-sponsored institutions like Radio Free Europe is like, we'll be there for you, because they were staffed by exile Hungarians, and we never showed up because we were a containment country. And the uniqueness of Iraq and Afghanistan was because it was after 9/11. I think that we're getting back to the conservative foreign policy in a lot of ways, and I put that in air quotes, that we had for the last 100 years in a way, which was interventionist in the sense that we're intervening in the affairs of other countries because we're the big dog and because spheres of influence, and particularly in Latin America, we can find some casus belli, that there's drugs coming in, there's immigrants, whatever it might be. And we all know, remember the Grenada invasion of 1983 was because they were holding medical students. It was the thinnest of reeds, but no one cared. Everyone was totally happy with it. A handful of Americans died. People forget that, but Americans did die in the invasion of Grenada. But we do all of that, but without the invasion component. I see that as probably Donald Trump's legacy when it comes to foreign policy from the conservative perspective. And I think the Tuckers and the J.D. Vances of the world will be the losers in that, because theirs is very much a Noam Chomsky vision of the world in getting out entirely, disentangling from Israel, not creating the Abraham Accords, letting those idiots handle it. That's effectively what they say about foreign policy. Maybe I'm being optimistic, because I don't think that's the worst case scenario if that happened.
A return to Moynihanism.
Yes.
I can't say that.
Correct. Yes, yeah, both me and Daniel Patrick Moynihan believe the exact same thing on these issues.
That's true.
We are brothers in more than our surnames.
Well, I don't think J.D. Vance is going to say anything against it until and unless he's actually in charge, and then it might look differently. You saw it was so clear in those leaked the text messages or the WhatsApp chain or whatever, that he had serious reservations about the attacks on the Houthis, but he was not going to say anything about that publicly. He acknowledged, he's like, I will be a team player, but here are my objections behind, behind closed doors. So that's very much what it's going to be.
Said like somebody who absolutely has presidential ambitions, is that I'm not going to say anything. I mean, Donald Trump said the other day, and it seems to be Steve Bannon believes that he's going to have a third and fourth and fifth and FDR-like run at the end of his life.
Bannon is the most complicit by the Epstein disclosures of anyone.
I want to talk about that too, because that drives me like, absolutely batty. that it is. Let's stick on that for 1 second, because I have a theory that is not very complicated, and I'm sure that a lot of people share it, which is that the conservatism of the past, which was one that was very much interested in what the Cato Institute, in what AEI, in what Heritage, before it became the Buchananite Heritage Foundation, we're saying about economics, what we're saying about this, there's a conservative vision, it's a Reaganite vision. You couldn't go to CPAC without every table selling some Reagan tchotchkes, put Reagan on Mount Rushmore, and Reagan disappeared from the conversation almost entirely, mostly because they don't like the fact that there was an amnesty under under Reagan. That's like number one. But there doesn't seem to be any ideological core to the current Republican Party, number one. This is the obvious point that everyone has pointed out. But also that there's not a lot you can do to get exiled from it. And a good example of that is Steve Bannon. Trump forgives everyone. We all know that, right? You can say he's a fascist and you become his vice president, right? You can, I mean, the guy who he just pardoned today, the congressman from Texas, and we should get on pardon power too. But I looked him up, and he had voted to impeach Trump twice, called him this, that, and the other. Now he's a kind of conservative Democrat. He's one of the very few remaining pro-life Democrats. But Trump is very open about how he forgives people. So nothing can really get you kicked out of the coalition, provided you're on board in those key moments. Steve Bannon is a great example of that. Sloppy Steve, as one of Trump's better nicknames. It's not as good as Marjorie Trader Green, which I think is really funny. But
best of all will always be General Betray Us.
Oh, that's a good. Oh my God, Robby!
All time.
Deep cut, a Petraeus general.
Well, you had me on your little neocon fantasies are bringing back some characters from the olden days.
I don't want boots. I don't want to make democracies. That's what the neocons want. I talked to John Bolton, much to the horror of listeners and things, and who was arguing very strenuously against not being a neocon. And it was comically cruel when he said, he's like, I don't give a shit what happens to these countries. Right. I don't want to build their democracies. Fuck them. That's why I'm not a neocon. I was like, oh, I kind of care about what happens. I guess I'm a globalist. But Bannon is a great example of this, who, I saw him the other day talking about how great Russia is and how it's the great Christian country and we have to support them. And again, this is...
Or that Chomskyite.
It's Chomskyite. It's anti-gay Chomsky.
Yeah.
Because they're no good on the, they're very, very good from their perspective on gay people and on LGBTQ propaganda, which literally you can, put a sticker on something and go to jail for it. But he's saying this the other day and shitting on Trump and shitting on Trump's conversations with Xi previously, but he's still the whisperer. He's still involved, and there's still so many people in Trump's orbit that are close to him. And you just brought something up that I wanted to get your take on, is that the level of involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, so much that a friend said to me yesterday, I think this is a very, very smart guy, very plugged in, journalist, said the last text, and this is so amazing, the last text, or one of the last texts, it might have been the last text that Jeffrey Epstein sent when he was alive, was asking Steve Bannon if he was going to go through with the dinner with Noam Chomsky, which I thought was like it was like a wormhole opened up in my universe. It was so perfect. But Bannon, who is so intimately involved, and we see it in those emails that have been leaked, why is he so bulletproof in MAGA world? Because he's like, there's a million things, but that one, they were so obsessed with Epstein, and he is up to his neck in Epstein.
Yeah. I've never met him in real life. I wonder if he's just one of those people who is personally, which this, because I know people find him like repellent, but he might be fun to hang out with or something.
The one of the best interviews I've ever done. He's so fun.
I mean,
in person,
this is the secret of like Tucker Carlson, is that people like him because he's been around a long time. And I worked for him at the Daily Caller as my career started, and he gave me great advice, and he put me on his show when he was on Fox. And I've always felt some appreciation for the guy and what he's doing, even though I disagree with a lot of what he does now. And that's how it works to some degree. Maybe Bannon's the same way, because he is utterly, disgustingly complicit in messages, in advising Bannon. You know, I don't want to turn this into, and some people have already turned it into, including, frankly, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I kind of appreciate her independence, some Red Scare-esque witch hunt. Whereas if you ever had any interaction with the person, you're going to, you know, it's like it's Me Too times 20 with these alleged victims who all know, you know, release details we already know, and but swore never to reveal in exchange for millions of dollars for whatever that is worth. And there's a certain amount of hysteria about it, but it's also the case that he was involved in really disgusting wrongdoing and was rightly prosecuted and would have been rightly prosecuted again, and knew a lot of influential people, and probably some of them did really gross things that have been covered up. So like that's true. But he, unlike people who, you know, maybe just had a meeting or took a call from the guy back before he was ever convicted of sex crimes, is messaging him right up until the end, as is Stacey Plaskett, the delegate for the Virgin Islands.
Amazing.
So complicit in this. He sought her for, or she sought him for funding, rather. You know, he moved to the Virgin Islands. He wanted to change the sex offender laws of the Virgin Islands. You know, a very libertarian cause, to be fair. And she gets defended like, oh, well, look at all these Republicans who took money from Jeffrey Epstein. Remember that last week from Jasmine Crockett? Different Jeffrey Epstein lady.
I want to make it clear that on this show, we celebrate people like Jasmine Crockett because she did something that was extraordinary. She went on, and I'll give her credit for going on to CNN, and it was pointed out to her by Caitlin Collins that there was a different Jeffrey Epstein, because, you know, it's a very rare name in the New York metro area. And there was this other Jeffrey, and she names the wrong one, and first says, I didn't have time to look up if this was the right one, which is when you don't do it, right? You don't put it out there. But she had one of the most hilarious, convoluted defenses of naming the wrong person. And I just advise everyone to watch it, because why do people think politicians are unbelievable shitbags? It's because they can't admit to a single mistake. And this would be a classic one, and be like, you know what, this is an unforced error, you know, even blame it on your staff. But she went in and defended it. And I just wanted to say, we appreciate you. We celebrate you, Jasmine Crockett. And we hope for more of this in the future, because it is so deranged that I thought it was really amusing. But on the Epstein stuff, you know, Trump obviously involved in Epstein's life in a different part of his life, Steve Bannon. But then you look, and one of the more interesting things, and Republicans have not made hay of this, because the Republicans who are truly obsessed with this tend to overlap with the Republicans who are obsessed with Israel and have tried to shoehorn Israel into every story, including this one, is that Epstein, he was friends with Ehud Barak, who has one person, his white whale, who he hates more than anyone in public life or probably in private life, is Bibi Netanyahu. He loathes him and wants to see him destroyed. And his affiliations with former Norwegian prime ministers, other people in the Gulf, Noam Chomsky, you know, the Democrat from the non-voting representative of the Virgin Islands, all these Democrats, all these liberals, and some Republicans and conservatives, there is no ideological kind of core to who Jeffrey Epstein was beyond power and influence. And as my co-host on my other show, Camille Foster, said to me today, he was a striver. And that's what a striver does. And I think that that's probably right. So all of this oxygen that Epstein has been taking up 6 years after his suicide, sorry people, but he committed suicide, is astonishing to me, because I don't even understand the ideological. Republicans get onto it. Democrats get onto it, and then it gets into conspiracy world, and people can't separate the two.
They thought, MAGA thought we would get, if the files were released, even though thousands and thousands of pages and reports about reports about reports about reports have been released time and time again, that if you got a release of more information, you would get your undeniable proof that Jeffrey Epstein and Bill and Hillary Clinton and children had all had sex together.
Yeah.
And now on the other side, since Trump didn't give MAGA exactly what they wanted on that, Democrats have decided that Trump is holding back the evidence of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein and children all having sex together. And the reality is that neither of those things happened. I don't believe they happened. And then they say, oh, you just believe everything the mainstream media tells you. Long history of skepticism here of mainstream narratives. And frankly, I've done a lot to debunk mainstream narratives. I don't naively believe everything that's printed in the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Atlantic. But that doesn't mean every crazy person is right about every crazy things. Crazy people should not be totally ignored, because often they have grasped some kernel of some truth that has been missed for political reasons or from sheer ignorance by mainstream sources. And COVID, I think more than anything else in my lifetime, has taught us to keep one ear open for what so-called crazy people are saying or who is being derided by the mainstream media. I see, I hear, I validate all of that. It does not make every crazy person right about everything. It doesn't mean that the obvious explanation is not the correct explanation 8 out of 10 times or whatever. Maybe it was many fewer times than that on COVID, but as a general rule, people will not be satisfied that the Kennedy assassination has been explained. They will not be satisfied that the aliens, there's no evidence has been credibly presented. People are not. And when it's not partisan, as this Epstein thing is almost not partisan because it involves everyone, like you said, that almost makes it easier for it to always have never given you the level of satisfaction you were expecting.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what you think about this as somebody who has done so much very valuable debunking of mainstream narratives, that we are in, we're always in a conspiratorial moment because that's who we are as people. But this seems like a place apart from all of the previous moments of conspiracy. And I know that there's a technological aspect of this, and there's the speed of things floating around Twitter and various other social media platforms, but we can't deny that Candace Owens is incredibly popular despite being clearly mentally ill and saying things that have like not only no grounding in truth, that are so like laughable on their face, that I'm shocked that anybody still listens to her. And I don't know. And again, I always want to make this clear that the number of people that listen doesn't mean the number of people who agree. Because I listen to her stuff because I'm trying to get a sense of what these psychopaths...
There are more Democrats watching Fox News than there are Democrats watching MSNBC.
Is that actually true?
Yes.
It doesn't surprise me. Yeah. It doesn't. I mean,
right. You can watch, to your point, you can watch without validating what you're watching. I
Correct.
Consume it because I find her to be the most ludicrous idiot. I mean, she's a grifter. She's just crazy. I don't know what the explanation is. She's dumb and bad and wrong. And I can't pretend that she's not. I usually find something nice to say about even some of these people who are out there, because some of them, again, every now and then they're onto something. That's just never the case with Candace Owens. Never, not once.
I think there's no doubt
she's not redeemable.
No, the anti-Semitism is very raw with her too. She's like classic European anti-Semitism. I mean, in the sense that she's, this number, if you say this number of Bolsheviks were actually Jews, Stalin was a Jew, and it's like, that is just raw, unfiltered, uncut anti-Semitism.
Like,
and it's usually
Fuentes
when you get to that.
Makes me laugh when his content crosses my feed. It does. I find him very entertaining. Horrible,
what do you like? Yeah, what do you
entertaining?
What do you make of Fuentes and his influence? I mean, there's so many people, myself included, who don't really understand whether it's, I'm living in a bubble and I'm consuming this content and he actually is influential. Or are we giving him far more power than he actually deserves?
That's a tough question. I think he does have something going for him, to be absolutely honest. I think he is, frankly, pretty talented and savvy for someone of these really out there odious views. Usually being obsessed with the Jews and having deeply and obviously racist and sexist and anti-Semitic views is generally a filter for being extremely talented and skilled at communication. I think he is good at what he does.
Yeah.
Just to be totally honest. Some of his boosting is foreign, as has been revealed with that great location feature on X. Now, he's still making, like, he's sincere. He's making the content. But what I've noticed happening is that there'll be all these Fuentes fan account, Fuentes update, that are like boosting the clips of him on all sorts forms of social media. And those are, I suspect, in many cases, originating from foreign accounts. There have been, I mean, at one point I asked Grok this. I'm like, Grok, why is Fuentes being fed to me to this degree? And it was like, well, it's a lot of Pakistanis and Iranians. So take that for what it's
Grok, which is the AI chatbot of X, was telling me.
It lifted up its skirt and showed me what it had going on. It was.
Oh man, that is really something.
But look, he's being covered by the mainstream media.
Yeah,
you know, they're making him look cool and frankly a little sexy in the way the New York Times has depicted him. I don't know. They picked the most flattering photo of him or edited it to make to look flattering. So he's being forced on you by a variety of parties for a variety of reasons that do not have to do with just him being successful on his own. But I don't want to discount him entirely. He is being successful because he has some talent.
I want to ask you something, because you're the sort of king of this, the undefeated champion of reporting on the excesses of what we termed in the past wokeness. I mean, you've written books about this, you've written countless articles, you've done really invaluable stuff. I mean, truly, I tip my hat to you of so many of these things that you've exposed and brought to people's attention. And, you know, there is obviously the theory, and I think partially true, that so many of these excesses produced so many of these characters, or they had a hand in helping create the Nick Fuenteses of the world, and those, you know, people in Tucker's ilk. And the number of people you see who have 200,000 followers on Twitter, and I've never heard of them, but they have a big podcast audience. Are we in a moment that, because, you know, this is the debate that everybody has, and there's no better person to ask about this than you, is, are we past it? I mean, you see it bubble up, and in the it being in this situation, what we would colloquially call wokeness. I don't know. I don't like the word, and I think there's so many problems with it. But do you believe that, I mean, the excess at the universities are not going away, but in the mainstream culture, it seems as if the grip has been broken, but then I see moments where I'm like, I'm not so sure. I think this stuff is harder to kill than people give it credit for. Where do you see us as a culture at the moment?
I mostly agree that we're past peak wokeness. I think it's been beaten back onto the university campuses. It's now been confined there. It's like, I guess, to use a Lord of the Rings analogy, we've banished Morgoth to the realm beyond Middle Earth. He still exists, but he's not like in our space anymore. That's where wokeness resides. Market sensitive organizations, by which I mean private companies competing in the marketplace, realized that wokeness was a loser in the marketplace, adopting it, signaling it, that catering to it. You can't make the 8% of the population that wants hardcore wokeness, you can't satisfy them. You can't make them happy. They don't want billionaires to exist. They don't want companies to exist. They don't want any marketplace structure whatsoever. They will not buy your things. You can't appease them. And so that was a lesson that entertainment companies had to learn, and media companies had to learn to some extent. It's not totally beaten out of media companies, but media companies have so many problems beyond just wokeness that it doesn't matter. So it's a loser in that terms. But to tie it back to what we were just talking about, this kind of right-wing identitarianism and Groypers and Fuentes, I have become, I think, more cognizant of not just a backlash to wokeness producing these people, but really the actual ideological foundations of wokeness and race-based identity grievances being what was behind the pushing of wokeness. How that must have clearly been eternalized by so many of these people, because they're making, I mean, if you think about it from reacting to the leftist, woke, racial collectivist person saying, stop thinking about individuals, stop thinking about equal treatment under the law, stop thinking about tenets of liberalism and think about how my group, often my racial group, has been disadvantaged, and I need structural protection for my racial group. And me as a Native American or a Black person or a Latinx person, that's the leftist perspective. I see these right-wing people saying, okay, well, I'm white. I'm thinking, you're telling me I should think about the interests of my racial group. So I'm thinking about the interests of white people, and white people are being disadvantaged. And I'm thinking I am race conscious the way you've wanted me to be. And I'm just thinking, what a terrible fucking mistake that was. I want these people thinking about race a lot less. In fact, I want everyone thinking about race a lot less. We are talking about race way too much in terms of our immigration, like every aspect, every crime that happens, we now think about what ethnic group was that? What are the exact statistics for that? What does that say for our immigration policy? How should I just trust my neighbors who look like that? It's disgusting. It's so vile on a liberal grounds. But it is what has consumed our politics. And I have to say, the woke people started it. The woke people pushed that. They got what they wanted on that level. I'll end my monologue there. But they got right people to think on those terms, and it is a disaster.
It's incredible how much it changed policy by it just existing in a way that kind of infiltrated the culture, particularly amongst Democrats, mainstream Democrats. I mean, it reached the mainstream in ways that were pretty surprising. And this is another conversation I had today. It was, Bernie Sanders was very, very critical of immigration. And he did it, the Koch brothers conspiracy, right? And he did it in this say they want to lower working class wages and they want to heighten their profits. And this was a perfectly reasonable left-wing position. I don't believe it, but it was a reasonable position to have as somebody on the left. And he made that argument in 2016. In 2020, Bernie didn't change his opinions on a lot of things, but he muted some of them because the new reality meant that immigration was an issue about race. It was not about economics anymore. That was a racially coded thing. You don't want these people invading your country, the Great Replacement, Tucker Carlson, et cetera. So the entire act of crossing the border became like part of the racial struggle rather than something that was almost explicitly previously about economic issues. I mean, sure, there's going to be people that are talking about it in racial terms, the William Pierce neo-Nazi types. But as far as mainstream Democrats, you could make that argument very succinctly, as Bernie did for many years, and talk about it. Immigration was a Koch brothers conspiracy. That is so bonkers and so far from where the Democratic Party was. And, he has snapped back. And he snapped back to saying that he gave Donald Trump grudgingly gave Donald Trump credit for sealing the border, because that's what Bernie actually wants. And he wants it from a left-wing perspective, but that you couldn't make that argument at a certain point. And I think it's going to take a while until we pull back the camera and realize how it infiltrated so many things in the culture. But I think that one of the things that people think that maybe it is receded to a point where we feel a little more liberated about saying certain things is two things: is that you're not necessarily destroyed as a worker in the economy anymore. That there's less of that. If you're in the media and you say the wrong thing, you can have a Substack and you can have people fund you directly. And also the corporate aspect of this, which is, is Amazon going to go to the places that it did before? Is Google? I remember Google Maps had a little toggle on it, 4 years ago, where you could search for, clothing stores in Manhattan, and it would just, be blanketed with these little dots, and you could click the thing and it would just be Black-owned businesses. I want to shop. This is true. I want to shop in a racially exclusive way. You had that button to push. And I believe that's long gone, and I don't believe it would ever come back. But I do worry that there's enough of a remnant of it that we should be not concerned, but not gleefully declaring victory over all of this stuff.
Well, and it still exists at the universities, right? I mean, that will always be a problem, that universities condition you to think in some kind of really weird race counting way, that we want this should be 16% of this group and 5% of this group and 30% of this group, in the most bizarre and frustrating of ways. I keep reflecting now on the Mamdani controversy, that wherever he went to college, that he checked technically not the right, the Ugandan, or it's confusing, like whatever, who cares?
Yeah.
But the boxes for when you're checking your racial identification are so specific, including like you could be Dominican or Haitian, even though that's like the same island.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if you're
Hispaniola, we call it.
but
To
then
go
there's like
back.
the box for white. And I'm like, okay, I would check. I'm Italian. I would check the same box as someone who's from Ireland, or the same box as
You're
someone.
Italian?
Everybody's blown away by the Soave. It's an Italian name. I mean, I know German a little bit, but I mostly have a very.
Yeah, but you look like one of the guys that came into Italy from Germany in like 1941 and was like, we're going to set up a base here. That's
very Italian Catholic background.
Is you're Italian? What is that? Like more than half? I'm sorry to get into race science at the end, but I want to be clear about this. I'm shocked by this, Robby Soave.
I know I don't look it, but I am. But...
Do you self-identify as a Guinea?
What do we call him?
Guineas. Come on, this is we're as Italian Americans. My grandmother is she's from Calabria. She was, rest in peace, Grandma. But I think that we have to take back the G word, which is what people like myself and you and Nick Gillespie, who looks really Italian but has a very Irish last name. That the Guinea. You haven't heard this?
I didn't know that one. That's a slur of our people.
You have lived a life free of the racism that I had to endure.
Yeah, I went to school with all Italians, so maybe I was not slurred by anyone.
A person named Michael Moynihan was not being slurred as an Italian, and everyone who sees me is like, "You're not like Danish or something." I'm like, "No, I'm what the mix was where I come from, which is Massachusetts, which is half Irish, half Italian." That's what we do. But and a final point on this is that there is no dislodging this from the university, is there? It's too embedded. I mean, Chris Rufo can, raise as much money as he wants and, attack, and rightfully so, catch people for plagiarism and stuff. But that's like, I don't see any rollback ever happening on a university campus. Make me happy, Italian comrade Robby Soave, and tell me that I'm being too pessimistic.
All we can do is every time these people leave the university is remind them of the market forces matter and the kind of self-victimhood they're used to doesn't work to get a job, and that there's not going to be disability psychological accommodations for 60% of you as they're accustomed to getting. I'm sure you saw that story.
I saw this today. Can you tell our viewers who are not as chronically online as we are what this was? And this, by the way, I seem to remember, from a very lefty source that was.
I think it was the Atlantic.
Was it the Atlantic?
The argument, I don't know, someone, or I saw Derek Thompson tweeting about it. I don't know.
Oh yeah, it was Derek Thompson from the Atlantic. Yeah, that's where I saw this.
A traditional media outlet. The percentage of students at elite colleges and universities, I forget which ones they use as an example, it might have been at Stanford and some others, who receive extra accommodations during exams because they cite a disability. Not they're blind and they need it read to them or braille or something, but they have a learning disorder and so they need more time or their parent to be present. That it's 40% of kids, it's 50% of kids, it's 60% of kids. It will reach the point soon. We will reach a critical mass where, I mean, at some point you're a fool for not seeking this accommodation.
Correct.
If everyone else in the classroom gets it, you're going to say you have a disability too. You're not going to be the only one to take the exam in the manner it's intended. It shows how bad it is to give power to victimhood. We've excessively stigmatized disability in the past. We now reward it with too much unthinking, like, oh yeah, take extra time. I'm sorry, on some level, if your psychological disability is you're not as good at math as someone else, then you should do worse on the math exam.
Dude, you're at Stanford. You can't be at Stanford. Get out of Stanford.
Yeah.
There's plenty of universities for you, like the one that I went to.
The exam is measuring your lack of equal ability at this subject. Like, we're forgetting what it's for.
That is, yeah, that I found really amazing. But it doesn't surprise me, because I have now, God, I can't believe I'm even saying this. I have a teenage daughter. She's 14, and she just started in high school. And the worries about social media, and I become Jonathan Haidt. But one of the most amazing things that I saw, in my opinion that I should never share because people get mad at me for this, but if you are on social media and you have a camera and you have a phone in your hand and you're crying and talking about your depression, I don't believe you. Because what people don't forget, they always forget, is that when you're watching a reality show, a quote unquote reality show, there's a camera in the room. And people tend to forget that. There's actually a cameraman and like a sound guy with a boom. It's like, this is not a normal reaction. Remember, people, that when you see these people having meltdowns on their social media, they are filming it, then they're cutting it. They're like editing the beginning and the end of it. It's like, no, if you're a depressed person like I am, you don't talk to people about this, and you certainly don't want it on social media for the rest of your goddamn life. So it doesn't surprise me that somebody has the SADS and they get to take their history of Byzantium class and get 4.5 hours to do the damn exam. But, you know, I'm not here to rant. I'll do that next week. I'm here to listen to the great Robby Soave. Thank you, Robby. Always a pleasure to have you. The group chat. What else do you want to promote? You got a new book coming out? You always have books. You're so prolific.
I am actually, I'm writing a novel right now.
Oh, no, don't do that.
I'm just writing a fantasy novel because I've got tired of writing nonfiction and I'm just doing it on my own.
There are a lot of your critics who would say all of your writing is a fantasy novel. But, that's different. But wait,
people should watch the group chat tomorrow afternoon. That's what.
Really the fantasy novel. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I'm doing 80,000 things. I do Rising. I do free media for Reason. I write a newsletter. I do the group chat. I do a lot. But
so wealthy, this guy's just has his fingers in so many pies, and now he's writing some Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe thing going on. Yeah. I don't know. Are you? Is it going to be a Christian allegory?
No, but it opens with a quote from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So there you go.
No, it doesn't.
It's an ice fantasy type thing. Yeah.
Did you, when I said that, did you say, fuck, I'm that predictable, I got to go back to the drawing board?
I'm very much I make a lot of Harry Potter references. I fall right into the read another book category.
Wow. God. All right. Well, today's guest was the world's biggest nerd, Robby Soave, who we discovered is writing a fantasy novel and is somehow Italian. And I still can't get my head around that. The nation of Italy can also not get its head around that.
What are you watch about it?
What am I going to do about it? Is that what you said? That was a very Italian response.
Italian one, yeah.
Thanks, Robby. Group chat tomorrow. What time is it? I don't know.
4, I think.
4 o'clock. Yeah, I watch it. When I do this stuff, I watch it after the fact. 4 o'clock. And the rest of you will be back next week at the same bat time and the same bat channel on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. We took that week off. I needed that week off, but I am recharged and re-energized. And I even came back and told you yesterday how much I hated the movie Good Will Hunting, which I watched over the holidays. Terrible movie. And if you want to hear my bitching about it, go listen to the episode from what was it, like yesterday, Tuesday, with the great Eli Lake. Go over to the Moynihan Report at YouTube and subscribe. Send me hate mail, as you often do. And keep the comments nice, because my mother can see those. So we will see you back next week, same place, same time. Bye.